Coming to you from 4,200 feet in the hills of Oregon, it is the voice of Chaitown, the reddest beard in the high desert, your host of the MOA Broadcast, Sam Wilson. All right, folks, we got a great show lined up for you today, all kinds of good stuff, a couple of quick highlights. Not only do we have our usual Florida man story today, we've also got a Florida woman. That's right, down there in Florida, even the women like to get involved in the insanity. We've got flash-flooded hikers, lab-grown chicken nuggets, and a rogue judge gets arrested and charged. Gonna be a good show, folks. Got to keep up because I do not have a moment to waste. We'll probably have to shed some material as we go. Now, don't forget, due to email suggestions, we now are also doing a weekly true crime podcast. It's about a 30-minute podcast in addition to our weekly MOA broadcast that comes out usually every Sunday or Monday. It drops on all the podcast platforms and so forth. Now, the topic of last week was Two-Gun Tommy DeSimone from the movie Goodfellas. That was based on a real character. In fact, almost all of those characters were based on real individuals. And it was a really good podcast, led quite the life. It was pretty interesting. Next, this coming week, we're going to be doing Anthony the Ant Spilotro. Now, if you know much in the way of mafia history and mafia crimes, criminals, so forth, are very popular. People love them. It's one of my interests as well. They're not people I want to emulate or spend time with, but man, it's wild. Those people a lot of them have just no limits on what they do. It's not always good, obviously, but it's always interesting. So Anthony Spilotro, or Tony Spilotro, they called him Anthony the Ant because he was short of stature. He was played by Joe Pesci, the same guy that played Tommy DeSimone in Goodfellas. He was played by Joe Pesci in the movie Casino. I forget whatever name they gave him, whatever it was. And Nicky something, Santoro, Del Toro, I don't know. Both of those guys were real people. Both of them were insanely violent people. Just reading some of the history on these people, it's disturbing. But we try and keep things PG, as you know. So we're going to do mafia-related crimes for this current series. If you have any suggestions on either crimes or criminals that you would like covered in our weekly true crime podcast, it usually drops on Wednesday or Thursday. So you got something at the beginning of the week and then something midweek to kind of keep you going. For those of you that like to listen to podcasts while you're working, driving, doing laundry, whatever it is you're doing, mowing the lawn, etc., you got something that, to keep you going. The hour-long MOA broadcast and the 35-minute true crime podcast, both are going out under the MOA name and the same account on Spotify and everything else, or you can get it at the gearconvoy.com website. That being said, if you have any questions, comments, suggestions on a crime or criminal or a series, something you would like covered, send us an email to info@gearconvoy.com, and we will take that into advisement. That's what caused us to do the true crime podcast. We had several suggestions from people that wanted to hear about, true crime, specific murders or criminals or whatever else. So let us know. We also, each week, we send out a free mini survival kit to the best suggestion / email, question / feedback, whatever that we get. Just a little, our way of saying thanks for taking the time to interact with us, because interaction is very important. So again, send us an email. That's info@gearconvoy.com. You might be on the air. As you know, this begins as a radio broadcast locally here in the Southern Oregon area, and then it goes out to a podcast to the world, and we do have listeners all over the world. So it's a lot of fun. Go ahead and give us your input, and we'll see what happens. Now, back to the issue at hand. We go to Florida, specifically Panama City. This Panama City woman arrested after posing as ICE agent to kidnap ex-partner's wife. Let's get to it. A woman in Panama City was caught and handcuffed after being accused of pretending to be a federal agent to briefly kidnap her ex-boyfriend's wife. 52-year-old Latronice, I don't know how you say her first name, no disrespect. Her last name is Battle. So Latronice Battle went to the woman's workplace. So the ex-girlfriend goes to the current girlfriend, or I guess current boyfriend's wife. So she got, these two broke up. The boyfriend moves on, gets married, but the ex just can't let it go. So she showed up to the woman's workplace at a hotel chain, allegedly, earlier this month, wearing a black shirt with the word ICE printed on the front. The victim, the new wife of the boyfriend, of the ex-boyfriend, who was in the process of becoming a legal U.S. resident, willingly went with Battle, or Latronce, who she believed was a member of the Immigrations and Customs Enforcement Agency. Apparently, she sensed something rather quickly was wrong and decided, I don't want to be part of this anymore. And she called law enforcement when she was taken to an apartment complex. Cops showed up, took care of everything. Battle, the ex-female in the situation, was arrested and is charged with kidnapping, robbery by sudden snatching, that's a new one for me, impersonating a law enforcement officer, and felony violation of probation. I guess she'd already had a run-in with the law herself. Now, you got to ask yourself, she took her to this new apartment complex. What do you think was the end game here? You got to wonder, how far was this lady going to go, allegedly, when she kidnapped her ex-boyfriend's new wife under the pretenses of being an ICE agent? Man, Florida, I want to get down there. Okay, we move on. We'll leave that one there. All right, this next one, folks, if you got kids with you, this next one has some minor sexually explicit material. It's all from a newspaper article, so it's relatively PG, but it is a bit more of an adult nature, so just be mindful of that. The headline takes us to Magnolia, Texas, which is just northwest, I believe, of Houston. It's not that far outside. Magnolia apartment maintenance man accused of showing lewd videos propositioning elderly residents. This week, we've got some good ones. I'm telling you what, this stuff is juicy, no pun intended. Magnolia, Texas. The maintenance man of a Magnolia apartment complex is accused of showing an elderly resident lewd videos of himself and then propositioning her. Phineas Diamond Medford III. Now, if that isn't the name for an alleged criminal, I don't know what is. Was recently charged with obscene. Phineas Diamond Medford III. Wow. Okay, was charged with obscene display or distribution, a Class C misdemeanor under Texas law. But what he allegedly did to, get ready for it, 81-year-old Dorothy Carlton has left her scared and traumatized. Whew. It all began on April 15 when Medford, 25, asked Carlton if he could come in. Now remember, he's the maintenance man, and this lady apparently is just a resident. So, put yourself in her position. The maintenance man knocks on the door, and he says he just wanted to come in and talk. Okay? Now, according to Carlton, I did hair for 40 years, so I would talk to anyone who thought the maintenance man, Medford, just wanted to visit. Now, these are her words, not mine. I'm dense, I guess, but I never expected anything. So he hands me my phone, hands me his phone, and I froze, recalled Carlton, who was shocked to see a video of Medford, the maintenance man. Remember, Diamond Phineas Medford III, or Phineas Diamond Medford III. He had a video playing on his phone of him pleasuring himself, allegedly. I went, oh my God, were you alone? I said, were you alone or was someone there? So I guess, I don't know why this lady at this point didn't, I don't know. Who knows? I'm not blaming her. I'm sure this is a shocking thing to have happen to you. You probably don't have any idea what to think. I've never had someone hand me a phone in that scenario like that, so I can't really speak from personal experience. But she asked him, were you alone or was somebody there? And he said, no, this is a late night thing I do. And he's, let's use a radio-friendly word, he's touching himself with his left hand, and his right hand was holding his testicles. Then he slides back and said, "Don't you want to touch it?" And I said, "No." And this time, I'm frozen. The woman kicked him out of her apartment and called her granddaughter first. I don't know why she didn't call the police first, but whatever. I'm sure, again, she probably didn't know what to do. She's 81. I would imagine this was quite a shock for her. They then called the Magnolia police. They arrested Medford on several outstanding traffic warrants and the obscene distribution charge. Now listen, this is interesting to me. Because he did not actually expose himself live and in person, the charges were only Class C misdemeanors. So I guess those were either non-arrestable offenses, or it didn't really add much to his situation, legally speaking. Now, isn't that interesting? He walks up to this elderly woman, somebody's grandmother that someone that we should all be looking out for, right? These are, people that we should be taking care of, vulnerable people. He hands her his phone playing a video of him doing lewd and obscene acts to himself, and then asks her if she wants to do it to him. And all that is a Class C misdemeanor. What did they call it? The obscene distribution charge. Now, isn't that interesting? You would think there would be, I wonder if these laws have been updated with all the current technology that we have. But imagine if somebody did that to your grandmother or mother or wife or sister. Can you imagine? How bizarre. Okay, now here's the interesting part. Within a day, Medford was back at the Park and Walker's Landing complex. Apartment management confirms. Was he fired? No, he is still technically employed there and has an active lease. Now, the lease part I can understand. There may be a complex legal situation where they have to go through and deal with that, whatever. I don't know. I can understand where that could get a little technical. But technically, he's still employed there. You got to wonder what in the world. Now, maybe it boils down to he's just been charged. They don't know. They don't want to, I'm sure they don't want to open themselves up to legal issues by firing this guy before he's just charged. He hasn't been found guilty yet, whether it's true or not. Allegedly, this, that, and the other. But can you imagine living there? So when Carlton told her situation to neighbors, here's the crazy thing. She was shocked to find out he had done this to other people. She asked a fellow resident who told her he walked up to her and said, "I don't want it to be awkward, but I just want you to know I'm into older women, and you're very sexy. And if you're interested, let me know," recalled the second resident who did not want to be identified because she has privacy concerns. Jeez, what in the world does it take to get fired? Can you imagine doing that at your job? How long do you think you would still be employed? Wow. Okay. I can already tell we're going to have to cut this next story. We'll try and include this next week. Guys, people are insane out there. The next story is going to bear that out, but this one here, we're not going to have time to cover. I'm just going to read the headline. This comes to us from Berlin, Germany. Okay. Man armed with a machete, beaten to death with baseball bats after 5 are arrested. We'll get to that next week. Now, here's the interesting part, though. When I was reading this article, it is insane to see where we've come in society, where we're at in the world today. Allegedly, this guy went into a coffee shop and started talking some smack and insulting people, and they talk some smack back or whatever. He left. He comes back with a machete and starts wielding it around, and 5 guys jump down. Apparently, at some point, it doesn't really lay it out clearly, but at some point, the guy who started attacking people or wielding or brandishing a machete is beaten to death with baseball bats, and the guy with the machete is listed as the victim when he was the initial aggressor, allegedly. So I guess you could call him a victim. He was the one that was killed, but what an insane situation. I don't know. It doesn't say if he was on drugs, alcohol, something else, but wild times. You got to be careful out there, folks. Man. Okay, we move on. This time we go to, don't worry, the news is going to get better. We have one more news story, and then we get into some interesting stuff. We go to New Jersey. Now, I don't know how much you know about New Jersey. I used to live in New York. People always, I don't know if they still do, I would imagine, they probably do. They always made jokes. You never wanted to go over to Jersey. It was considered inferior to New York. There was always toxic waste jokes because of plants that were over there and factories and so forth. It was viewed as New York's, inferior little cousin, or stepsister, stepbrother, whatever you want to call it. It was kind of an insult to talk about people in Jersey. Just a little backstory. But Jersey always had some wild stuff come out of it. I went over to Jersey. So we used to go over to Jersey occasionally where there was good Mexican food over there, really, really good pizza. New York gets a lot of the credit for the pizza scene, but New Jersey had some amazing, a lot of Italians, and I'm not even making a joke or a slight there, a lot of Italians, a lot of culture there, and a lot of good pizza. And there was also a steakhouse, what was it called? Arthur Treacher, something to that effect. It wasn't the greatest steakhouse, but it was kind of well known. It was right across the bridge or the tunnel, over in Jersey, and you get like a steak and like this big stein of beer and everything else for, I don't know, it was 25 or 30 bucks or something, which at the time was, considered a fairly good deal. I remember the steaks being decent. The beer was good. It was a big stein. It was, nice atmosphere. I'm sure there were plenty of other better places to go, but I had a good time there a number of times going with buddies and whatever. Anyway, that's our little venture down memory lane. South Jersey father and son charged in beating death of man with baseball bat and flashlight. This comes to us from ABC. We go to Vineland, New Jersey. A South Jersey father and his teenage son are facing homicide charges in the killing of a Millville man. Eric Hanna, 55, and his 17-year-old son were taken into custody on Easter Sunday. The pair is accused of beating the victim, 54-year-old Louis Gus Serbeck, to death with a baseball bat and a metal hammer. Investigators say this all stemmed from an alleged assault. According to his brother, Christopher Serbeck, he would do anything for anyone. He would take the shirt off his back and give it to you just because you needed it. You call him, and he'll be there. Christopher tells the Action News his brother died trying to protect his daughter. Now, this story, this is the problem that we live in, with the society that we face and the world we live in now. There's always been insane people. There's always been murderous, homicidal people and people that were unpredictable and or folks that were on any sort of substance, whether it's alcohol, drugs, whatever. But we are now living in a world where increasingly people, they will take exception and offense to almost anything, and they will skip that logical chain of progression during a discussion and jump right to lethal violence. That's what happened with this guy. So apparently his daughter had been assaulted the day before, and the next day comes around. I guess she tells her parents what happens, and her dad goes down there to check it out and see what's going on. Now, the tragic part of this story, or part of the tragic part is, this article isn't very well written, but apparently the aggressor was family friends with the family. Okay, they had been families or friends since high school. Let me jump back in here. On Sunday, this is Easter Sunday, he went down to Hannah, that's his daughter's home, on Leamings Mill Road in Vineland, New Jersey, where his daughter had reported an alleged assault the day before. According to the criminal complaint, what was meant to be a conversation quickly turned physical. Serbeck, this is the father, he went down to sort this thing out with his daughter and old family friends, allegedly. He was struck in the head several times with a metal baseball bat and a metal flashlight. Now, I said hammer earlier in the story. I don't know. You got to keep in mind, a lot of these stories, especially when the reporting is new, they kind of dance all over the place. I don't know exactly what's accurate. His daughter was also hit in the head during the fight. The aggressor was allegedly a lifelong friend of the family and went to school with the brother, the oldest brother, and they had known each other their whole lives. So, man, what a horrible tragedy. Eric Hanna is currently in the Cumberland County Jail. He has a detention hearing scheduled for Friday, and his son is detained in a juvenile facility. It's still being decided whether he will be charged as an adult. The 17-year-old is also charged with aggravated assault against Serbeck's daughter. So they may have found enough probable cause, it wasn't just a fabrication most likely, to charge him with that assault, that alleged assault as well. What a shame. Family broken up. So, again, here at the MOA Broadcast, we try and talk about what could we learn from the situation. Some of these we like to have a good laugh at. I mean, you got to admit those first couple of stories were kind of funny. This one's tragic. What do you learn? Man, unless you absolutely have to, don't engage people over stuff like this. If it's going to be violent, or if they've already allegedly or possibly, exhibited or demonstrated violence, don't get involved, man. Either go to the authorities or decide Is this important enough to deal with or get away? Because you never know. Each week, I cover multiple stories like this in the show. I come across dozens, if not probably hundreds, over the course of a month or two in 4 to 6, 8 shows of stories that just went horribly, horribly wrong for no reason. Like that one we had last week or the week before, where the guy was walking down the steps to the subway. He just picked a random senior citizen and started caving her head in with a hammer and took a couple of bucks off of her on the steps to a subway entrance. If at all possible. I mean, this isn't like it was 20, 30 years ago where you could either have a discussion and or things escalated maybe to a scuffle and then it was done. That still happens, but there are a lot of people they're ready to go to crazy town over the most minor of things. Just like when you see the videos, I saw a video that I was going to do a story, but there wasn't enough information to do a complete story in the MOA broadcast. Maybe in the future when more comes out. There was a minor road rage thing. It wasn't even a fender bender. There was no collision, but these two guys got into it. Both of them had firearms. The one guy approaches the other vehicle. He gets out of his car and approaches him. He had his firearm in his hand. Before he could even wave it at the guy shot him from inside his vehicle and killed him. He was still on his honeymoon or had just been married like within the last week or two. Was it really worth that? I'm not picking on the guy. I'm not casting judgment. I don't know all the details. But we do know for a fact he had just been married a couple of days earlier to his new bride, and now he's dead over essentially what boils down to nothing. So really, really choose wisely when you want to interact with people that have already shown aggressive or exhibited, angry or violent behavior. It's a crazy world out there. All right, now we go to these are our outdoor stories. I'm an outdoorsman, if you would call it that, a fisherman. I don't do a lot of hunting, but I do go squirrel or other type hunting occasionally. I haven't been in the last year or two. Lots of fishing, though, lots of hiking, backpacking, camping. And so I try and get a focus on that stuff. I've got a reasonable amount of experience in that background of that field. So I try and focus on that. That's part of the MOA, or Make It Out Alive, broadcast theme. So we go to El Paso, Texas. A 36-year-old man suffered head trauma after falling nearly 100 feet while hiking a Dog Canyon Trail on Easter Sunday, April 20, near Alamogordo, New Mexico. He was rescued by Fort Bliss Army Medical Evaluation, or medevac crews, according to a press release from the 1st Armored Division. Let me get a sip here. You would have no idea probably how the toll that it takes on your voice when you do a lot of voice work and talking and reading and podcasting and all this kind of stuff. Now, just a quick side note, when I read this story in Fort Bliss, the first thing it made me think of was one of my favorite movies. I don't know if you guys watch old movies or not. I love old westerns, one of my favorite genres. A lot of good movies came out. There was a movie called Lawman. It was a Burt Lancaster film. Who else did it have? It had Robert Ryan. Robert Duvall had a pretty decent sized role in him when he was very young. And it's about a guy who's a sheriff. It starts off with these cowboys. I won't ruin the whole thing, but they shoot up a town and a guy dies. They weren't intending to kill anyone, but these cowboys that are running a herd of horses or cattle or whatever, they shoot up a town and get drunk. And this old man takes a bullet to the head and he dies. So the lawman from that town takes it upon himself to go and track down this group. They're not really killers. It was an accidental death, but the sheriff, played by Burt Lancaster, his name is Jared Maddox. Yes, Jared Maddox. He does a great job. He's almost like the Terminator. He sees black and white. There's no gray, and these guys are all going to come back to Bannock. It escalates from there because the cattle baron who was running the guys, he doesn't want to give in to the sheriff, and neither do his guys. This is this is in the wild, wild west, long before the internet and all this other stuff. So basically, you could do anything you were big enough to do, and they decide they're not going to go back, and mayhem ensues. And it's a really, really good article, or a good movie, excuse me. And the neat thing is, you see the progression of this sheriff. He's on a straight line to justice to take these guys back to the town of Bannock, which is also a great bread, homemade type bread. And he goes through several changes due to things that happen. But in the end, it's like they said in Godfather, every time I try and get out, they pull me back in. So watch that movie, Lawman, with Burt Lancaster. Great film. Also featured Sherry North, who at one time was being groomed to be the next Marilyn Monroe. Interesting story. We'll get back to our show, our story here. Let's see. Anyway, the point that I was making though is Robert Ryan's character, who plays a guy named Cotton Ryan. He was kind of famous in the movie because he had made a big name for himself at Fort Bliss, which is where this took place. But he later loses his nerve, and then he has to gain it back. It's a great western, very minimalist. They don't go over the top. It's just raw and simple. A very, very good show. Lawman, watch it. Okay, the 1st Armored Division says the medevac team mobilized to Fort Bliss and executed a high-risk rescue on Easter Sunday at around 1 a.m. after a 36-year-old man suffered severe head trauma after falling nearly 100 feet. He was in stable condition at the ICU in El Paso after he was rescued. What this made me think of is how fortunate we are now. And we got to keep moving here, but think of all this technology. A number of these stories that I've related in the last several episodes, think of the massive role that technology has played in these stories. Years ago, a lot of these people would have just been dead. There would have been no question about it. There would have been no cavalry coming in, nothing. They would have just been casualties. I mean, whenever I was a kid hiking in the woods, a teenager, and even beyond that, there were no cell phones. There was no reception. If you got into serious trouble, man, you were on your own. Good luck. So, and I'm not saying that's better. I'm just saying, man, how fortunate we are, which brings us to our next story. Body of missing Grand Canyon hiker found after flash flooding prompted rescue of more than 100 people. A missing hiker, I guess, I don't know what happened to him. They don't really get, some of these stories are very incomplete, even though I do a lot of research. The body of a missing hiker was recovered along the Colorado River on Sunday after flash flooding in Grand Canyon National Park prompted the rescue of more than 100 people. So flash flooding came in, it started raining, and I don't know if you've ever experienced flash flooding or not. I have. I grew up near a floodplain in rural Missouri, and we actually had flash flooding. In fact, one time we had several that were big. I think the big one was the biggest that I can recall was 93. The Mississippi just got out of control, did a tremendous amount of damage. I'd have to double check on that year, but I'm pretty sure it was 93. There were even t-shirts people were wearing about it afterwards. It was so big. We almost lost our house when we weren't even on the floodplain, but we were close to it. If you never experience a flash flood, it starts raining, and then it starts raining and raining and raining, and next thing you know, the water just comes out of nowhere. Within an hour or 3, we had water that was within a foot or 2 of our front door. We lived on a small hill, and you could just see it coming up our driveway. Our neighbors had to be evacuated in canoes and boats, and we managed to my dad decided, he was very intelligently, to get out of there ahead of time, and we drove out through a mess of water that was flooding the inside of our vehicle. Our neighbors that waited had to be evacuated in boats. Okay, we're going to get back. We've got more when we get back. We've got the rogue judge. We've got more on this lab-grown chicken nuggets and more about situational awareness when selecting a campsite, which dovetail with our stories about the floods when we get back from the break. More Make It Out Alive with Sam Wilson after this. You're listening to the MOA Broadcast with Sam Wilson. Will you make it out alive? All right, and we are back from the break. This is the MOA Broadcast with your host, Sam Wilson. Okay, folks, let's get back to it. We were talking about the flash flooding. So what had happened, I'm going to have to trim this story because there's other stuff I want to get to. There's just never enough time. Basically, a bunch of folks over 100 people had to be rescued out of the Grand Canyon last week because of this flash flooding. So we discussed briefly flash flooding before the break. If you've never experienced it, literally, there's a reason they call it flash flooding. It's amazing. You're just sitting there. It's a hard rain usually. And before you know it, depending on where you are, the water comes out of nowhere. You got to be extremely careful. And in a canyon, I would imagine it could be even faster because that water starts getting funneled down from all sorts of tributary sources. What happened though is, let's see, where to go, yada, yada. Let's get to the story part of this. A married North Carolina couple, this was the most salient part to me that was interesting. A married North Carolina couple told CNN they were hiking in the Havasupai, Indian reservation on Thursday, and nothing could have prepared them for what was about to happen. The lady, the wife, 34, knew rain was in the forecast, but didn't anticipate it would result in flash flooding. It didn't even occur to us that we were in danger. What happened is they were hiking, her and her husband, along with a family of four. They ducked into a cove to avoid getting drenched. As they waited for the rain to stop, a Native American man, riding a mule, or excuse me, who was described as a Native American, I don't know what difference that makes, but anyway, spotted them and yelled, higher ground, higher ground. So he knew what was up. If he lived in the area, was riding a mule, he'd probably been there his whole life for a very long time and knew what time it was. And again, if you've never experienced, it can be extremely treacherous. So they sensed the panic in his voice, she says, and they saw the area starting to flood, so they began climbing. They reached higher ground, and the group of six set off for the nearest village. For the next 3 hours, we crossed rivers, formed human chains, and hacked through the thorny bushes and cacti, she said. At one point, a huge boulder crashed right in front of them, hitting a tree, which sent a large branch in their direction. After they arrived at the village, they were greeted by other hikers, and the National Guard evacuated her and her husband to safety Saturday morning. So, what's the takeaway? What is the point? Well, situational awareness in the wilderness. We talk on this show frequently about the term situational awareness. For those of you that are new to joining us or don't recall, situational awareness is exactly what it sounds like. You're just being aware of what is going on around you, thinking a couple of steps ahead into the future and trying to anticipate what problems may occur and how you would address those if they were to happen. And so this is not about blaming anyone, because really in a flash flood is, again, just that. You can't really anticipate. A light rain doesn't mean a flash flood. Even a heavy rain doesn't necessarily mean a flash flood, even if the area is prone to it. So it just happened. Fortunately, those folks made it out. Excuse me. But what I wanted to do was take the opportunity to discuss 3 different instances whenever I was hiking, and I needed to exercise situational awareness. Fortunately, 2 out of the 3 I did good. The first one happened when I was a teen. We'll do that one first. Didn't do quite so well there. So, let's see. This was a hillside camping spot while backpacking with friends. Whenever I know I was a teenager. I believe I was under 16, and I think I've referenced this instance before on the show. Me and a couple of buddies were out backpacking, and this was in southern Missouri near the Ozarks. Flash floods there can be very common. Depending on where you are in the United States or around the world, wherever you're listening, a lot of people don't get thunderstorms and heavy rains. They may not understand what that's like. Like out here in the Pacific Northwest, we don't typically get heavy rains and thunderstorm. It's usually a light, like in the Portland area, it's like a light mist or a heavy mist that just kind of goes on and drags on for hours or days with very little in the way of actual accumulation. Now, in the Midwest, in Missouri at that time, we would get thunderstorms where you would just get huge amounts of rain. It was unreal. If you haven't experienced it, it's hard to believe how much water would come down. We were young. We weren't thinking. I don't think there was an experienced adult with us, and we were all teenagers and younger. So we found a decent little camping spot, but it was in this little flat spot. It was on the side of a hill, though, and so it was like this little, a little depression on the side of a hill. It gave us great cover from the wind. It was windy that night, and we were trying to get cover from the wind because it was just ripping through our campsite. So we're having a fire, and we wanted to be able to, plus the mosquitoes were insane. I remember on that particular trip, the mosquitoes were so bad that I had literally taken mud and wiped it all across my face and exposed skin because the insect repellent was just not doing the job. I'm going to get a drink here. Okay, so we've established that, and mosquitoes are often indicative sometimes of a lowland area as well, which is where we were. And so what happened is we made camp on this nice side of the hill where we're kind of sheltered by hills and heavy foliage and trees. And so it was great. It was a great spot. But when it started to rain heavy, all that water came rushing down the hill and collected and accumulated in that little flat spot of that low area that we were in. And all of a sudden, like, it started raining. We thought no big deal. We had rain flies. We were prepared for all that. But when it kept going and going, I noticed water starting to creep up into my tent or get close. I can't recall. I'm pretty sure water started creeping into my tent. I know my buddy who was a little bit further down, I heard him start yelling whenever the water started coming in. He was talking, hey guys, we got to move, or I got to move. Can I come to your tent? Whatever. I don't recall exactly what was said. But then we started hearing this rush, and we didn't know, we thought it was wind at first. It was the water come rushing down the hill, and it was collecting in this little depression that we were camped in. And anyway, long story short, it wound up basically wiping away. It swept away my buddy's tent and all of his gear, and some of the other stuff that we had laying around the fire, which of course was just flooded with water. Now the good news is the next morning we had spent a very long night, cold and wet, like a bunch of wet dogs sitting around smelling and stinking and just being miserable. But we did manage to recover and recoup all of our gear. I think it was now here's the funny part. We couldn't just go home. We were like halfway through, like a 3-day trip. It was equally about a day and a half out, no matter which way we went. We went back to the trailhead, or if we kept on going. So of course we pushed through. Wound up having a real good trip. But yeah, the point is we should have been more situationally aware of our surroundings. And I was young. Everybody else, I was probably, unfortunately, the most experienced on that trip because everybody else didn't really know what they were doing. They had gear. The one guy, I remember most of his meals were literally canned goods, like canned chili and canned beans and whatever else. Let me tell you, it was a very smelly trip. But anyway, being aware of your campground. Our next story. Let's go. Let's jump right in. I was on a backpacking trip several years ago, going back almost a decade now, with several other guys. This was in the Oregon area. Now, these guys, you can't entirely blame them. They had been, I think, hiking, backpacking a couple of times. I remember the one guy, I could tell, had no idea what in the world he was doing. He literally brought a folding chair. No joke. He had a folding chair strapped to the outside of his backpack. So I knew he had no idea what he was doing on this backpacking trip of like 18 or 20 miles. Okay. Well, anyway, the first night we made camp, they all got mad at me because they selected this nice looking camp spot on this flat rock on the top of a bluff near like I don't know, it was like a 60 or 80 foot sheer drop off. It was like a bluff there. And they thought it was to the east. So we're like, all right, they were like, we're going to have a great sunrise view in the morning. And I was like, guys, think about this for a second. We're on sheer flat rock here on top. There's very little trees or foliage. Winds come ripping through here on rock faces all the time. Being that it's almost all rock we're on, we're going to have very, very loose, weak soil to like drive in our tent pins and tie off our wires for our tarps and other things. And being on this flat rock, we're going to get winds ripping up through here. It's not going to be very pleasant. They're like, no, you're always crapping on us, Wilson, blah, blah, blah. This is going to be a great view. Okay, well, fast forward. Guess what? It worked out exactly like that. The winds were insane. Now, I knew this going in because this wasn't my first rodeo. So I made sure I pulled my tarp. I was in a hammock. I had pulled my tarp in nice and tight. So I was insulated from the winds very well. I slept like a log. They were up. I heard them all night long, up moving around, trying to drive in their stakes for their tarps. One of their tarps ripped open. I think one of the guys forgot his tarp. It was a mess. It was like the Keystone Cops. But what's the point? It's not that I'm an expert or I'm the best. I'm not. Believe me, I've got some stories about myself that would make you laugh. I've made some very serious mistakes. But being, again, situationally aware, I knew what was going to happen, but they were painting me as the bad guy. And I mean this in a very good-natured way. It wasn't a huge problem, but I could tell if I kept pushing it, they were going to get upset. So we made camp there, yada, yada, yada. In the morning, I was right. They were wrong. We all got the point. We moved on. Nothing really had to be said. It was understood. That's one of the nice things about, going with guys. Nothing against women, but guys typically get it. Okay, yep, that was a bad idea. Let's not do that again. All right. Our third instance, this happened just about 2 years ago or less. I was hiking here in the hills of Southern Oregon, and I was out doing a day hike, I believe. I don't think I did overnight that time. And I was looking for a nice spot. I was at the headwaters of the spring or creek or river, whatever it was. It was absolutely beautiful. The water was crystal clear. You could see to the bottom of the water literally in every direction, all the way across the lake. It was really beautiful. And I was hiking along, enjoying my time by myself and, hearing the sounds of nature. And it was kind of a cool day. I remember having a jacket on, but I was like, okay, where am I going to sit down and have my lunch? I was going to have some type of hot meal. I forget what it was. But I was going to cook a small hot meal there and enjoy my lunch out in the wilderness. And just as I sat down on this beautiful scenic spot, I got up and I thought, you know what, let me do my due diligence and walk around and inspect the area. Within 5 minutes, I found 2 or 3 different instances of mountain lion scat. And if you do your research, it's very easy. Mountain lion scat is that's the poop or poo poo for those of you that are not familiar with the word scat of the mountain lion. It's very distinct. You can tell it from other animals very easily. And I'm like, okay, that's interesting. 2 or 3 different instances tells me this is an area they frequent, probably for water. Then as I was working in a circular pattern. As I opened up my pattern, I saw there were at least 2 different deer carcasses that had been, eaten up. There were just the carcasses left and part of the heads. They hadn't even been completely decomposed. And I'm like, okay, let's think about this for a second. We got lots of mountain lion scat, multiple dead deer that had been either taken here or dragged here or whatever. They probably came to water themselves and were killed by the mountain lion or whatever and have been consumed there. This probably isn't the best spot to cook up a hot meal, or else I might become the next hot meal for that mountain lion or mountain lions. So the point is, be situationally aware. That's our MOA Outdoors bit for the week here. Be situationally aware, not just in town, when you're looking for active shooters or muggers or whatever craziness may befall you in the city. When you're in the wilderness, be aware as well. You're probably not going to see them until it's too late. If you read a lot of stories, a lot of people, these are the ones that survived mountain lion attacks and whatever else. I've seen bear on the trail, mountain lions, lots of snakes. Not here in Oregon, but other places. The thing about wild animals is, guys, these are not like domestic animals. They don't mess around. It's not a game to them. This is life or death. If they have decided to make you their prey, they have already decided your fate in their minds. There's not going to be hesitation. There's not going to be any last minute, he seems like a nice guy. In most cases, they just do it. And if you're extremely fortunate or lucky, you're going to see them before it happens. A lot of people don't even see it until they're on the ground getting mauled. So just something to think about. Now we move on to lab-grown chicken nuggets hailed as transformative step for cultured meat. The Guardian. That's a newspaper. I looked, before we even get into the story, I looked at the pictures. I'm going to try, if you have the video version of this podcast or broadcast through patreon.com, if you go to gearconvoy.com and click on the MOA Broadcast tab at the top of the page, you can see all the information on how to get the video version of this broadcast as opposed to just the audio. I'm going to try and put the picture in here. This looks disgusting. And I'm not trying to pick on these people that are making scientific advances. That's a lot of hard work. They're probably far, far smarter than I can even fathom. But it looks and sounds gross. A Japanese-led team grew 11-gram chunks of chicken and say the product could be on market in 5 to 10 years. They're claiming a breakthrough in lab-grown meat after producing nugget-sized chunks of chicken in a device that mimics the blood vessels that make up the circulatory system. Guys, I hate to be the bearer of bad news here, but it already exists. It's called a chicken. Chickens already exist, and it's very easy to process them into nuggets. Oof. Now listen to how this is done. If this doesn't turn your stomach, you are tougher or got a more cast iron stomach than myself. The approach uses fine, hollow fibers embedded into the meat to deliver oxygen and nutrients to chicken muscle cells suspended in a gel, an advance that allowed scientists to grow lumps of meat up to 2 centimeters long and 1 centimeter thick. Now, that's a pretty small nugget, but I'm sure they know once they get it down, they'll be able to go on from there. The hollow fiber bioreactor. Now, I'm not making fun of or derogating these folks and their research. I understand the endeavor of science. However, as a consumer of meat, and I love chicken, fried chicken is actually one of my all-time favorite meals. Fried chicken with cayenne pepper sauce and mashed potatoes and greens is, good luck beating that meal. I love mashed potatoes just covered in cayenne pepper sauce with my fried chicken. That being said, as a consumer, this sounds disgusting to me. The hollow fiber bioreactor paves the way for whole cuts of chicken, beef, pork, and fish to be grown in the lab. Researchers believe the same technology has the potential to produce functional organs too. Again, I would just submit that chicken, beef, pork, and fish already exist in the wild. And we've been eating them for a very long time, very successfully. Okay. They call it the chicken nugget model, blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. A major hurdle to growing meat in the lab is the difficulty in getting enough nutrients and oxygen to muscle cells and thick sections of tissue. That's why they have to embed those hollow core fibers to deliver the nutrients in the blood. Now get a load of this. Where did it talked about somewhere they had to use synthetic blood. Where'd it go? They feed them with oxygen, blah, blah, blah. One of the key challenges is the center of the cells struggle to receive enough oxygen and nutrients, which may lead to cell death. They describe how they grew an 11-gram chunk of chicken from a gel that had more than 1,000 hollow fibers running through it. A culture medium rich in nutrients and oxygen was pumped down the fibers to nourish the cells. Ugh. Guys, the picture looks disgusting. Again, no offense, folks, but it sounds gross. They're aiming to replace these hollow core fibers with edible cellulose fibers that can be left in, because they have to pull out all these fibers before they can move the meat forward to the next stage. They're going to try and come up with cellulose fibers that are edible and used to vary the texture of the meat. Oh, he said future versions may need artificial blood. There's where it is. Future versions of the bioreactor may need artificial blood that carries oxygen to the cells to allow the growth of larger lumps of meat. With sufficient funding, he believes products based on the approach could be available in 5 to 10 years. No, thank you. Okay, now we move on. We got to keep moving here. We got just enough time to get this justice. Our next headline comes to us out of Wisconsin. Milwaukee County Circuit Judge Hannah Dugan charged with 2 felonies in ICE case. ICE, for those of you outside the U.S., stands for Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Let's get right in. This article, this is insane. If you're outside the U.S., briefly, what's going on right now is there is a big push to get rid of illegal aliens and people that are undocumented, as they call them. The words are interchangeable, however you want to rephrase it. Because there was a massive flood for several years. We're not going to get political. We're just relating the facts here. There was a massive flood of illegal immigration for several years. And now the presidential administration is on a mission to deport a lot of people. For some reason, these are people that have broken the law. If you're here illegally, you've broken the law. I'm not going to get into the felony, misdemeanor, civil, federal, yada, yada, yada. The bottom line is, if you're here illegally and you've entered illegally, you've broken the law and you're subject to deportation depending on your circumstances. That's the basic part of it. It's a little more complex. That's the basic part of it. Some people, for some reason, are pushing back on this, and they do not want people who are here illegally to be deported. I'm going to leave it at that. Again, it gets political very quickly, and I don't want to push political opinions on you or have them pushed on me. We're just relating the facts. So let's get into it. According to a 13-page complaint, Judge Dugan, who was charged April 25 with 2 felonies. This is a judge. A county circuit judge was charged with 2 felonies on allegations of trying to help an illegal alien or undocumented immigrant, as it is called in the story, to avoid arrest after he appeared in her courtroom. According to the complaint, the 2 charges carry a maximum penalty of 6 years in prison and a $350,000 fine. But in nonviolent offenses are typically much shorter, so on and so forth. So I'm going to just paraphrase this whole thing. Federal agents found out this guy who was named, Eduardo Flores Ruiz, an undocumented Mexican immigrant. That is the undisputed part of this, apparently, was due to be in court before Judge Dugan on April 18. He had been deported from the U.S. in 2013, but I guess was back for more. ICE officials obtained an arrest warrant for Flores Ruiz on April 17. Now remember, he was going back to court before the Judge Dugan on April 18. 6 members of the Milwaukee ICE task force dressed in plain clothes went to the county courthouse to arrest him at about 8 a.m. They informed the bailiff in Dugan's courtroom what they were planning, and they agreed to wait until after his court appearance to proceed. A clerk, for whatever reason, notified the judge that it appeared that ICE agents were waiting in the hallway outside of her courtroom. According to reports, she became the judge. Now remember, this is the judge there to uphold law and order, became visibly angry and commented that the situation was absurd. She left the bench and entered her chambers. She then confronted members of the arrest team, according to the complaint, while visibly upset and had a confrontational and angry demeanor. She told the members they needed a judicial warrant, not an administrative one, and told them to report to Chief Judge Carl Ashley. They did not do that, apparently. While this was going on, the bailiff informed the arrest team, which had ICE, FBI, and DEA officials, that Dugan had expedited Flores Ruiz's case. They told federal authorities that she then forcefully motioned for the defendant and his attorney to exit through a side door that near the jury box, which leads to a private hallway and then to a public area outside the courtroom. So basically, she told him, go ahead, get out this side door, according to the complaint, and get out of here because there are ICE agents waiting for you. What happened next? DEA saw Flores Ruiz and his attorney get on an elevator, and he jumped on with them and radioed apparently to his team what was going on. When they got off the elevator, they were confronted by 2 more agents outside the courthouse. Then a foot chase ensued, and they pursued Flores Ruiz for the entire length of the courthouse and ultimately apprehended him near the intersection of West State Street and 10th Street. He was handcuffed and detained. Records show Flores Ruiz was charged April 24 by federal authorities with illegal re-entry into the United States. Now, listen to this. In a federal court appearance the same day, Flores Ruiz's federal attorney said a judge assisted his client in this endeavor and that Flores Ruiz was acting on the advice of his state attorney regarding the escape, apparently. It's not exactly clear. Wow. Flores Ruiz is listed as being in ICE custody at Dodge Detention Facility in Juneau, according to federal online detainee locator system. Now, we don't have much time to dig into this, and it's just happened. There's going to be a lot that comes out of this. I read several articles by legal experts. This is just like that situation with Attorney General Big Tish James from last week. Guys, I don't know what's going to happen to him. I'm sure it's going to be a complex legal thing because it's become political now. But suffice it to say, you do not want to be in the situation. They have got some big problems, whether they're guilty or innocent. And the experts all said both of these folks have some serious problems if what was outlined in the complaint forms can be corroborated. They have some serious issues. You do not want to be these folks right now. I don't know how in the world a judge would get it in their head to do this if she allegedly, actually did it. But wow. Okay, it's time to wrap it up. I need a quick sip. Let's get to it. Where do we go? You may have guessed it. We are back in Florida. Headline: Florida man claiming to be Jesus and God shot dead after attacking parents and firing at police. I'm not laughing at the man's death, but there's some sort of substance involved in this most likely. Let's get to it. A disturbing scene unfolded in Bartow, Florida, when a man who claimed he was both Jesus and God was fatally shot by law enforcement following a violent domestic incident and a tense confrontation at a local store. The man, identified as 34-year-old Wayne Volz, was killed on Friday, April 18, shortly before 5:30 p.m. after authorities responded to reports of a volatile domestic dispute in Fort Meade, a small town about 45 miles east of Tampa. Long story short, folks, this guy was with his parents in their home, apparently, and they had a violent disagreement at about 11:30 a.m., and allegedly the man Volz, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, my apologies to the deceased man and his family if I'm not, he is accused of violently pistol whipping his mother with a gun and assaulting his father when he attempted to step in during the dispute. Apparently, he screamed, allegedly, "Do you want to die today?" at his father and threatened both of them while ranting about being of divine nature. He reportedly declared himself Jesus and God and called his mother the devil and took their phones and held them hostage in their own home for several hours. Somehow, the father was able to convince him that it was time to go to work at a nearby Lowe's store somehow. I'm guessing the guy was impaired in some way, whether he was on a drug trip, alcohol, or he just may have not been right mentally. Something was clearly going on. He then told his father, "Let's go. Apparently, I'm going to go to Bartow and kill a lot of people." Now they get to the store. Fortunately, the employees weren't a bunch of Karens, and they immediately realized the father was telling the truth. They contacted law enforcement and got things going quickly. They hid the father. They called 911 and got a police response happening quickly. The sheriff confirmed that this man was known to police as a drug addict and had a history of erratic behavior. So they used a drone to find the dude. They spotted him outside the store, and despite commands to stop, he ran. So in the ensuing chase, he still wasn't done with his violent spree. He opened fire on a sheriff's vehicle, discharging 7 to 8 shots around the cops, one of which struck Deputy Edwin Alexander. They returned fire, and Officer Mark Sills was also hit in the chest during the exchange. Vols was hit, sustained critical injuries, and was transported to a nearby hospital where he later succumbed to his injuries. He's dead. According to reports, both injured officers were treated at local hospitals and are expected to recover fully. So I guess after he claimed he was Jesus and God, he went on some kind of a rampage, shot 2 cops, and was eventually shot down fatally by these same police officers. So folks, I guess the moral of the story is next time you're in Florida, make sure you're cautious if someone says, "Hey, do you have a moment to talk about our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ?" All right, folks, that's going to do it. That's all we have for today. Remember, don't wait until you have an emergency to prepare. If you wait, it may be too late. If you don't make it out alive, you don't make it out at all. Stay safe out there, folks.